I want to start off this video with a simple dough counter. The running theory that I'm going with for this series is that when we see a dough in the game, it represents Rachel Amber. Last episode, we saw the dough in some form at least 4 different times. This episode, the dough can be seen on a sticky note, on Max's t-shirt, the Two Whales bathroom, in the junkyard, and in Max's journal. This brings our total dough counter by the end of episode 2 to 9. As I mentioned in the last video, the game often rewards players if they decide to search around the area. This usually comes in the form of new knowledge about the world or the characters, and sometimes it's just for a fun moment. At the beginning of episode 2, you end up bringing Kate's book back to her, and you have the chance to explore her room. You can find messages from her relatives, pictures of her family, her bunny, and even her Bible. Looking around the room is completely optional, but later in the episode, it affects how the players try to talk Kate down off the roof. Once Max makes it to the roof, the player doesn't have the option to rewind, so the choices that are made are set in stone. This whole situation deals with how you have treated Kate before, such as stepping in between her and David Madsen or taking her phone call in Two Whales. But even if you didn't do some of those options, you still have the chance to talk her off the ledge by using the knowledge you might have gleaned from her room. Here, looking around her room proved to be essential in getting her to walk away because we don't learn these right answers just from talking to her. I think on a base level, the game is teaching the players to look around more and how the outcomes might be changed based on what you see. But also, the game is showing how we as people should take more of an interest in people's lives. I don't recommend snooping around someone's room without permission, but it is a lesson in listening and watching, instead of thinking of your next line. Showing a vested interest in someone could quite honestly be the difference between life and death. Lastly, if any of you are struggling with mental health, suicidal ideation, or attempts, please reach out for help. It is not a situation to be taken lightly, and I urge you to find someone you trust, ask for help, and do your very best to take care of yourself. I have listed some resources below that I hope will help some of you. This game does a great job painting multiple suspects for what happened to Rachel Amber. You have Samuel with his weirder demeanor and the pictures of Rachel Amber in his closet. You have David Madsen with his persistent need for cameras and surveillance. Nathan with his erratic nature and his involvement with Chloe and Kate. And Frank with Rachel's bracelet. What is great about this is that it makes the reveal of who is actually behind everything so much more shocking. There are so many misdirects and other leads to follow before the player really considers, spoiler warning, Mr. Jefferson as the mastermind. I will talk so much more about Mr. Jefferson later on, but it's amazing how well the game does at drawing your attention away from him while still leaving subtle hints and clues.
How was your drone?
Miss Grant busted me flying it over the parking lot. She's all jacked up about surveillance bullshit. Like I was spying on Warren's new car.
You already planted a GPS on him?
I borrowed the one he has on you.
Hi, Taylor.
Hi, Taylor.
I had no idea that you could talk to Taylor in this game or that we could get any information about her. Once Max is in front of the dorms to head out to breakfast with Chloe, you have the option to talk to Taylor. She's very dismissive and rude at first, but she mentions something about her mother being sick. With a quick rewind, she tells us more about her mother and how Victoria has helped her through that difficult time. I don't think this gives Taylor any excuse for how she treats people or bullies Kate, but it does give her more depth than just a mean girl. She's probably really attached to Victoria because of the situation with her mom and doesn't want to be beside herself dealing alone. Taylor most likely just follows Victoria's actions to keep a friend and cover up any of the stuff she's dealing with. Again, it's not an excuse, but I like how the game gave her more depth than previously thought.
Now I know if I'm in an accident, I won't rely on you or Courtney for help. You can hang out with Kate. Or Max.
Something I didn't know about Arcadia Bay until playing the game recently was that there are many citizens who are in sort of a financial problem. We see a lot of this through exploring the area around the Two Whales Diner. The First Lady speaks about how she is having to go to Newport to find a second job and that she can barely afford to live in Arcadia. The man beside her is focused on winning $1 million from the lottery ticket he just got. The fisherman outside with his stand mentions that harboring rights have caused him trouble with catching fish, and his flyer is about the man made drought in the bay. A man reading the newspaper outside the diner says how Arcadia Bay will be a ghost town in a few years. And the homeless woman behind the diner says how greedy people have ruined the town and put people like herself out of work in their homes. The common denominator in most of these situations have to do with the Prescott family and how they basically dominate the town and how it works. It's not unusual to have cities and towns with people who are struggling financially, but here we get to know more about the city and the clear divide of the two sides the city has. We have the side that the Prescotts have made, like Blackwell, and the side they've caused, like the people around Two Whales. This gives more depth into the world we are playing in and helps reinforce the power that the Prescott family holds, even outside of Blackwell.
Lovely young woman. How are you doing, Max?
Hi, Joyce. It's nice to see you again.
Joyce is such a warm and wonderfully added character to this story. For me, she is like Max's mom away from home, and I love the dynamic these two have. Even in this playthrough where Max lied about the blunt in Chloe's room, Joyce still meets her with compassion and only a little reprimanding. She even mentions that she thought the act of what Max did was honorable and doesn't guilt trip Max for moving on in the last 5 years. Joyce has such a good heart, which can be seen again from the homeless woman's experience with Joyce, her compassion with David, and her deep love for Chloe and Max. Out of all the characters in the game, she is one of the few I think about when making the last decision in the game. You can't help but feel for Joyce because of the loss of her first husband and the spiral of Chloe, all while she's just trying to move on. Max said it best when she said she wanted to be just like Joyce when she grows up.
Joyce rules. I want to be exactly like her when I grow up.
Looks like you're on your way.
Speaking of guilt tripping, let's talk about Chloe. Episode 2 is really the episode where we start to see more of a shift in Chloe. We know Chloe is blunt and has a lot going on, but in this episode, we see a lot of her fears manifest through guilt tripping. She does this about Max not calling her in 5 years, when Max doesn't shoot Frank, when Max takes Kate's phone call, in more situations. Chloe mentions that she treats these instances as another time that someone has let her down. We learn later that this stems a lot from her father's death. She has been so hurt from people leaving her that now she thinks no one is on her side or will stay. It feels like her against the world. Her guilt-tripping nature has become a coping mechanism and an automatic response. It's something that most players loathe about her because nobody wants to be guilt-tripped. But I believe it is essential to her character and her arc through the story. We also have to remember that Chloe is still a teenager, growing into an adult, but she has experienced all these events early on in her life. These events just happened, and Chloe looks for someone to blame to make sense of these events. Chloe hasn't moved past these people leaving, and she harbors that grief daily in the form of distrust and guilt tripping others.
Too old to get lectures from you or Sergeant Pepper.
Call him David if you don't want to be lectured. You only get one damn slice of bacon a day.
Circling back to the scene with Kate on the roof, I mentioned in the first episode that I believe Max's power came from trauma, specifically the event of seeing Chloe get shot. This shows up again in this scene with Kate jumping off the roof. We see this horrific event happen 3 times until Max has completely stopped time. This traumatic event has granted her something new while also stripping her of the power when she made it to the roof. I think the intensity of the situation and Max's strong sense to save other people gives her the ability she has and allows them to change during the story. I just wanted to add in this moment because Victoria and Nathan talk about Max while she is standing right there. I get it's for the whole mean attitude they have against Max, but it just looks so stupid when Max is standing right there. Also, I have a question I would like to pose. When Mr. Jefferson comes into the class, he tells everyone that is not in the class to leave.
I know you love me, but if you're not in this class, beat it. Everybody else?
This includes Nathan, which had me confused at times. We know Nathan does photography and he enters a photo in the Everyday Heroes contest, but he is not in Mr. Jefferson's class. I doubt there's another class with Mr. Jefferson teaching the same thing since it's such a small school of high school seniors. Going from a class of 8 to 9 wouldn't be a big deal. The only answer I have for this is that Nathan can get away with not going to class because his family basically owns the school, and his relationship with Mr. Jefferson probably helps in that case. Let me know if you have any more ideas, though. Last point of interest, who is Mr. Jefferson talking to on the phone? For the longest time, I thought it might be Nathan, but then Nathan is in the classroom of Victoria. Maybe it's Nathan's dad, maybe it's Principal Wells, maybe somebody else who has his personal number.
Max is such a little...
Shh, I think she can hear us.
This. The weather confirms this weird day. Feel that chill.
Max, there was no eclipse scheduled today. I would know. I would.
I believe you, Warren. I'll believe anything this week.
And once again, we are at the ending of episode 2. The ending of episode 2 involves another freak display of nature, an unscheduled solar eclipse. This is another display of how Max is changing everything around her. By the end of the episode, Max has saved Chloe again, and possibly Kate, depending on how you play. Those two things were on a specific course in nature, but were altered by Max's involvement. In this ending, we also see Joyce comforting David. We don't always see eye to eye with David, but this is an important moment that I don't think is talked about. It shows how desperate David is to save these students. We know he is trying to get more surveillance because he believes it will help keep the students safe and avoid another Rachel Amber case, a student that he believes he failed. Kate Marsh becomes another one of those failed cases for him. The doors to the roof weren't locked and he wasn't able to make it to the roof in time to save her. He blames himself incredibly for all of this, and this scene shows the caring and compassionate side of David. David is another character that is dealing with so much trauma that goes unnoticed. And last but not least, the red binders make an appearance. This is a common theme throughout all the endings. This time, we get a little more information about the scene, and the players become more intrigued as we see pictures of Kate Marsh.